Eat it.
In the early 1950s, a blue-collar writer of comic books exploded onto the American scene with a series of best-selling mystery novels that remain controversial to this day. An international sensation, Mickey Spillane even portrayed his own sleuth on the silver screen, the only mystery writer ever to do so. And his tough, sexy detective, Mike Hammer, is father to action heroes from Dirty Harry to James Bond.
Stay there.
In Mike Hammer, Mickey Spillane created the definitive version of a new kind of American hero, born in the pulp magazines of the late 1920s. A lone individual seeking justice. The private eye.
That detective, whether male or female, is not going to be owned by the rich and powerful, and also that person is really working for the underdog.
Classic private eye in mystery fiction is someone who, no matter how outnumbered or how outgunned, still feels that one little thread of hope that says, I can win, I can beat these guys down, and I can make something change.
Most of our heroes and bad guys were Western figures. But as we emerged into the industrial age, the private eye sort of took that mantle on.
Mike Hammer was not the first fictional private eye.
While Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler were successful and well-known, they never approached the kind of success in terms of readership, numbers, the magnitude of recognition that Mickey had.
If it weren't for Mickey Spillane creating the basic mold, the other writers would have had a hard time inventing it.
You were influenced by Mickey Spillane, whether you've read him or not, because every other private eye writer is influenced by Mickey Spillane.
And first image that strikes to mind is, is the hat and the trench coat, and the gun and the shoulder holster, the bottle in the desk drawer. And we tend to think of Mike Hammer before we think of anybody else.
The detective genre, as it comes out of the hardboiled genre, is kind of like a blue-collar existentialism, where you're talking about people trying to think about what's right and wrong, but on the everyday level of the street.
The best-selling writer who brought a new level of violence and sex to the private eye story was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1918. But the date of his birth, appropriately, is a mystery.
I was born so close to midnight, they don't know if I was born on the 8th or the 9th. My mother said to my dad, "Jack, look at the clock." I'd already been born a couple of minutes, and it was a couple of minutes after midnight, so they stuck with the 9th. It could have been born on the 8th.
Mickey's father was a bartender.
John Joseph Spillane. Good Irish name, I was a month old, and I moved to Elizabeth, New Jersey, and took my mother and father with me. So I had a good upbringing. Had farmland, a lot of fun, chickens, cats, dogs. My dad named me Mick, and I became Mickey. My mom called me Babe. Babe, she'd yell it out the window. But my mother taught me to read and write long before I went to school. I started writing when I was in junior high school. This was a time of depression. We knew all the bootleggers hid this stuff. And I was writing stories about bootlegging for the Elizabeth Daily Journal. But that's when I got the idea of being printed. It was nice seeing yourself in print.
After high school, Mickey attended Kansas State College in pre-law. Mickey worked his way through college writing for national magazines, making more money than the dean of the college.
We'd take writing courses. I was turning in my carbon copies what I had already sold in New York.
Dropping out of college to pursue his flourishing writing career, Mickey returned to New York, entering a new storytelling field.
I was in that first group of writers, and when we first started comic books, I was working for Funnies Incorporated.
There were shops that were essentially factories, little studios that would produce the contents of the comic books for the publishers. Mickey would have entered the business at the same time as people like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, all the major names in the comic book business.
In 1942, he came up with a revolutionary idea for a new kind of comic book hero.
Mike Danger was the original prototype of Mike Hammer.
But when World War II came along, Mickey put his comic book career on the shelf, including Mike Danger.
Well, I was in the service for almost 4 years. I became an instructor. That's where you really learn to fly, when you're instructing. You learn things that you forgot about, but to learn them very specifically is great.
Mickey spent most of the war in Greenwood, Mississippi, where he met and married Mary Ann Pierce.
When I was in the Army, I saw the initial attempt of getting reprints into paperback on the market. And all I could think of is they're going to be putting out original paperbacks. This is the new concept coming up.
The male population sort of adopted the paperback as the format after World War II because they had been used to receiving paperbacks in their packs when they were sent off to war. They came home looking for heroes for them to read, and they found one of their own, Mickey Spillane himself, a returning hero.
Captain Mickey Spillane left the service in 1946, returning to the New York area with his young wife. The comic book market was in a slump, and another round of unsuccessful efforts to market his Mike Danger comic book led Spillane to convert his private eye to prose, with a significant name change.
And I just absolutely fell in love with Mike Hammer because he was strong, he was a protector, he was handsome, he was sophisticated in a little country girl's eyes because he lived in New York City.
I had to get out of New York City. I couldn't stay in that place anymore. I got to live up in the country, up in Newburgh, New York, and I needed $1,000. And at that time, he only gave $250 to a writer to write a mystery story. I needed 1,000.
The first Mike Hammer mystery, which Mickey wrote in 9 fevered days, was published in 1947. It sold only a few thousand copies in hardcover. But Spillane had his $1,000, and he built his concrete block house. Mickey returned to comic book writing. Then, in December 1948, I, the Jury was published in paperback and was an immediate smash.
I think his contribution is far beyond mystery or crime writing. I think he's a phenomenon in regard to the whole evolution of the mass market paperback, and was probably the first great star.
Following Spillane's lead, publisher Roscoe Fawcett initiated the first paperback originals, books written to capitalize on the market Mickey had uncovered.
About a lifetime ago, I was in the Army during the Korean War, and I walked into a barracks, and a man was reading a book, another soldier, and he said, "Did you ever read Mike Hammer?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, this is Mike Hammer." And I said, "What is it?" And I said, "Well, it's sort of a private eye novel, but it's different."
When the war was over, people were used to violence. And, you know, I was in the military. I knew what they were thinking. I knew what they eating and drinking. That's why I had Mike. I didn't make Mike a pilot like I was. I made him want to come out of the trenches, where most of the people were. And they knew what a person's mind could do to them when they came back, and a .45 was the gun that they used, you know.
Readers had never seen a hero quite like Mike Hammer before.
When you're under fire all the time, and you're constantly in the midst of the criminal element, you have to maintain that. I mean, it's a soldier mentality.
Is Mike Hammer uses all the devices that we have come in the past to understand are the devices of the villain.
He's the ultimate anti-hero, but gee, he's a tough guy. He's tough with women, he's tough with the people he talks to. He doesn't want to give 1 inch to his compadre on the police force.
If I came across Mike Hammer in real life as a police detective, as I am in the LAPD, I'd probably be booking him.
In the post-World War II era, readers, particularly returning veterans, easily identified with Mike Hammer.
424 North Worcester, first floor.
There's never been a description in any Mike Hammer book of what Mike Hammer looks like.
It's a state of mind. You know, if you describe a guy as being 6'2", stalwart, big muscles, and dark red, how can a guy who's short and fat think that he's the hero in the story? He can't do that. But if he's not described, that guy can be the hero in his own mind. There was a real Mike Hammer, though. And he's dead. He just died last year. His name was Jack Stang. He's one of a group of Marines that went into the Pacific Island. They went in with 120 guys, and there were 4 left when he came out. I always want this guy to be in a movie, to play the part.
A guy like Spillane, he was a guy who came out of that war with a lot of strongly held beliefs about America, about life. And I think that his books are about friendship, about belief in your own character, about being your own man, the kind of guy that Chandler says, you know, that you're a proud man, you take no man's insults, you pay him back dispassionately. Well, Mike Hammer pays nobody back dispassionately.
I'll find him, Dewey.
In I, the Jury, Hammer swears vengeance over the corpse of an army buddy who had lost a limb in the Pacific protecting Hammer from a Japanese bayonet. No matter who the killer turns out to be, Hammer will execute the murderer himself.
The startling end of I, the Jury, it's truly, I tell people to this day, if they haven't read it, one of the best endings in mystery fiction ever written.
How is a guy who's never touched a girl going to react when she's taking off all the clothes in front of him and going to kiss him? Now, she comes over to kiss him. Now, if he kisses her, she's going to reach behind his head with a gun and blow his head off. But he stays true to his promise, and you hear, bow. And she shoots her right in the belly button.
The final line of I, the Jury, Mike Hammer's answer to his dying lover's question of, how could you, is one of the most famous of popular fiction. It was easy.
Yes, he is an Old Testament character. He is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. If the cops are coming down the road and he's got him at gunpoint, he's going to take him out.
If anybody kicks my cat, I'm going to whack him in the ear, see? There's someone who's always kicking his cat, so to speak.
Along came Mickey Spillane, and all of a sudden it was possible for a man to get angry, to get guilty, to react not because this is the best thing for God and country, but because he's irritated at the moment.
These people are vigilantes. They feel that so many people are evil and deserve to be punished, so that they are often judge and jury themselves and executioner. And I find that a repugnant point of view.
I know the Bible says, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, but Mike Hammer cannot tolerate legal systems which are corrupt, which falter over and over again, which do not acknowledge the rights of the victim.
The swift violence of Mike Hammer's retribution was matched only by Mickey Spillane's abrupt punch to the solar plexus endings.
Think of it like a joke. What's a great punchline? Get the great ending, then right up to it.
One thing Mickey was very clear on in his work and even enunciated was that the first chapter sells the book, the last chapter sells the next book.
There was a line in there where after she cuts her clothes off, it says, and she was a real blonde.
And every kid reads that and says, my God, I want to be Mike Hammer. I want to be there, and I want to see that woman, and I want to be the one saying to her, it was easy.
And these lines, the people, they come back and give me these lines, and they'll say, like one of the lines was, she walked toward me.
Her hips waving a happy hello.
He's describing a pimp, and he says the only shadow he cast was by artificial light.
On some people, skin is skin. But on you, it's an invitation to die.
I'm clean, Mike. I'm clean inside.
Words are my business. I love words.
The private eye of Spillane's fiction may have inhabited a gritty world filled with realistic violence and frank sexuality, but it had little to do with real-life detective work.
We were repo men and skip tracers and embezzlement investigators and process servers. And these things, none of these things has Mike Hammer ever done. Mike Hammer forgets to get paid most of the time.
Friendship and loyalty are absolutely critical to him. He doesn't take cases for money. He's much more concerned about finding the bad guy.
In the conservative 1950s, Mickey Spillane was to mystery fiction what Elvis Presley was to popular music. Wildly popular and incredibly controversial.
And I remember my mom and dad saying, what are you reading? And I said, Mickey Spillane. And they said, you're reading that dirty book?
As a matter of fact, read Mickey Spillane in the classic Mickey Spillane fashion for my age. It was inside another book.
I mean, I used to do, you know, what everybody else did. You read it with a flashlight, and you take the pages and you turn them down, and you read them over again. And
I don't think my parents realized that I was so immersed in the world of Mickey Spillane until one day someone asked me, as grown-ups always do, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be Tina Maria, nightclub dancer.
The recurring cast of characters in the Hammer novels is small.
It's a phony.
Mike's cop pal, Pat Chambers, and a very special Spillane variation on the private eye's secretary.
Remember me?
I would have loved to have played Velda. To me, that was my favorite character because she was the one who knew him personally on a different level from the rest of the women.
Well, I loved Velda, and I thought she was brilliant and sexy and strong, and she was everything that I thought a woman should be.
She's beautiful, and she's strong, and she's got a PI license, and she carries a gun. I mean, this is not a weak woman.
The Velda character to me was really his right arm, and tough, too, and I liked that about her. He wrote an independent, tough woman.
By 1951, Mickey had under his belt the 3 best-selling mysteries ever written. Mickey's delivery of his new Mike Hammer manuscript to editor Victor Waybright revealed success and celebrity had not changed his unpretentious blue-collar style.
I brought up one lonely night in a paper bag. I had a pair of dungarees on and a T-shirt, just come out of Newburgh, summer, hot day. And I brought him into, and I had been carrying this thing under the seat of my car for the last week, kicking it back every time I come out. And I brought him that paper bag and I gave it to him. Oh. He calls the bank across the street, gets 2 security guards that come up with guns. They took this thing down with their hands on their guns to cross the street to put it in the bank safety deposit box. And I said, I don't dare tell him I had it under the seat of my car for a week kicking around.
Mickey may not have had artistic pretensions, but he had clear, precise ideas about his craft.
I found out with titles, which is a very important thing, that I use personal pronouns in all my early books. I started running out of personal pronouns. It was I, the jury, my gun is quick, vengeance is mine, kiss me deadly.
In 1953, when the first printing of the paperback edition of the new Mike Hammer rolled off the presses, there was a deadly error.
It wasn't kiss me deadly like it's a deadly kiss or something like that. She's talking to the girl. She was a deadly person. And he says, kiss me, Carmine, deadly. Now, they printed it, and they put the covers on, and I said, I will not accept that cover. You're going to put that comma back in there again.
Spillane's colloquial writing style occasionally caused an editor to fix something the author hadn't broken.
Nobody ever walks across the bridge in a night like this. Well, hardly nobody. And an idiot editor takes nobody, the second nobody, and makes it, that's wrong, it should be hardly anybody. I said, oh, you nuts. Now, the last line in the book is the same as the first because it all comes back to the bridge again. The George Washington Bridge. He says, no, nobody ever walks across the bridge on a night like this. Well, hardly nobody, because he's there, see. But it was a play of words. And it gets you aggravated when they start changing things that's stylistic, important.
Spillane once bet an editor $1,000.
I told him, I said, a perfect book is written with the climax on the last word of the last page. So that if you took the last word away, you wouldn't know what the book was about. When I turned in Vengeance is Mine, I turned it in without the last word on the last page. He says, well, what was the word? What was the word? Just give me the $1,000. I gave him the $1,000, I gave him the word.
From the beginning, there was a storm of controversy over Spillane's strong sexual content and violent action scenes. Along with comic books and rock and roll, Spillane was blamed by commentators as a prime cause of juvenile delinquency. Spillane was blasted as a prime mover in America's moral decline.
And when I was growing up, I mean, he was sort of a watchword, Mickey Spillane, Mike Hammer, for the violence and the risque.
We were a very Puritan nation right up through the 1950s, and it was only at that point that the old standards and barriers began to fall. And I think it was through people like Mickey Spillane getting out there and effectively butting his head against the wall that made those walls collapse.
It wasn't violence or sex for the sake of violence and sex. It was there to propel the characters and to propel the story along.
Then one day they took a story of mine when Mike Hammer kills 200 people. They said, that's too much violence. You can't have all that kind of violence in there. Because he went in with a machine gun. He was machine gunning these people, all communists. So I said, okay, so I changed to 100.
He was not afraid to write about violence. He was not afraid to write about politics. And he was not afraid to write about politics from a point of view that was not necessarily the most popular in the, say, Eastern establishment of New York publishing.
In the mid-1950s, an author named Frederick Wortham wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which primarily attacked comic books as supposedly a cause of juvenile delinquency. The only author he attacked, aside from comic book writers, was Mickey.
He spoke directly to readers, so critics despised him.
I went to a tea party, if you can imagine me at a tea party, you know. But anyway, there they had this funny little guy who was a very self-important fellow. He liked to, anyway, he come to me and he said, "What a terrible commentary on the reading habit of the American public."
That you have the seven top bestsellers in America today.
All I could think of to say was, you're lucky I didn't write 3 more.
You know, I like that. I like the way he, you know, his kind of, it's kind of a put-on arrogance. I mean, he feels very strong about himself, but the arrogance that he puts out, you don't feel like he's trying to put you down. You feel like he's being his feisty self.
At one time, I was the 5th most widely translated writer in the world. Ahead of me was Lenin, Tolstoy, Gorky, and Jules Verne.
The international appeal of American, should I say, hard-boiled writing, I think it's basically the phone version of the American dream. It's the other side of a dream. It's the violent side of a dream.
And it was interesting how, when the Soviet Union broke apart, that Mickey Spillane became the #1 author in Russia.
Kiss Me Deadly, Mickey's 7th novel and 6th Mike Hammer in 5 years, was his most successful yet, cracking the New York Times hardcover bestseller list. Then, at the peak of his popularity, Spillane took a 9-year hiatus from novel writing. Some have blamed the critical hammering he received. Others cite a religious conversion that seemed to contradict everything Mickey Spillane's fiction represented. Was this a bizarre admission of guilt?
One of Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't write about that in fiction stories. I mean, that's outside, but there are ways you can temper your work, which I do without spoiling it.
Spillane says he doesn't consider the Mike Hammer yarns inconsistent with his conservative religious beliefs.
They were very moral. He was a guy, he had a black hat on, but, you know, he did the right thing. It was that you were going against certain accepted writing mores, see. I didn't care what they were saying in the editorial offices. I didn't say, you can't do it this way, you can't do it that way. Today, they have codes that they expect you to abide by. I don't accept their codes.
The world's toughest, most unlikely Jehovah's Witness took time off from novel writing to pursue various macho enthusiasms worthy of Mike Hammer himself. And for a number of years, traveled with the Clyde Beatty Circus, getting shot out of a cannon.
When you're sitting on a thing like a bicycle seat in there, it's compressed air that throws you out at the shoom, and there's no impact to it. Now the boom that goes with it, it's all the eyewash.
Spillane, living out his fantasies, only partly explains the drought of new novels. Throughout the 1950s, Spillane the celebrity was everywhere, and licensing of the Mike Hammer character was skyrocketing. First a radio show, then a project that took Mickey back to his roots.
But the only licensed product that Mickey was really involved with was the comic strip drawn by Ed Robbins. And Robbins was a terrific cartoonist, and his work had this edgy, nervous quality about it, where you just figured that somebody was just going to get punched in the mouth about any panel. There was a Sunday page that involved a torture scene in which a woman, I believe, was going to be burned on the bottom of her bare foot with a cigarette.
We were the only ones who were kicked off because we got too sexy.
With all this public attention, both positive and negative, for Mike Hammer and his creator, it was inevitable that Hollywood would notice. About the same time Fred Astaire was spoofing Mike Hammer, producer Victor Seville was buying up the rights to all the early Spillane novels.
Now, all Seville wanted to do was buy my name and my character. He loused up those pictures so badly just to make money. Now I suddenly saw the greed in these Hollywood characters.
Mike Hammer was played by TV and stage actor Biff Elliott, who many considered miscast, Spillane included.
Biff was my size. He had a Boston accent, and he was left-handed. When I saw Biff get hit on the head with the coat hanger and got knocked out, I said, can't have this. You know, this isn't Mike Hammer.
The public's failure to embrace Biff Elliott as Mike Hammer led Seville to choose the non-Hammer novel, The Long Wait, as his next production.
The guy who wrote it never read the book. It had a good premise to it. He never knew what it was.
Trying to convince producer Seville to cast Jack Stang as Hammer, Mickey wrote and directed a short test film himself.
Jonathan Winters was in it. He played the hobo. Betty Ackerman was in it, and she was the nurse on Ben Casey. We had good people in that thing.
Seville continued to spurn Jack Stang as Hammer, although the screen test did get another producer interested.
Bob Fellows, he was John Wayne's producer.
In 1954, Spillane played himself, and Stang played an unnamed but obvious Hammer in Ring of Fear, centering around the Clyde Beatty Circus. After several disastrous weeks of shooting, executive producer John Wayne asked Spillane to rewrite the script.
And he didn't know what to give me. He wanted to, and I didn't take any money for doing the rewrite. So they knew I liked cars. At that time, I was a hot rodder. And I used to look at these lovely cars out there in Hollywood. And I swear to God, but I never thought of owning one. And here I am up in Newburgh, New York, on a wintry day. I opened up the front door, and there out in front of the house is this car sitting there that had a big red ribbon wrapped around it with a card that, thanks, Duke.
Mickey's attempt to make the public embrace Stang as Mike Hammer backfired. In Ring of Fear, it was Spillane who seemed like Mike Hammer come to life. The next Victor Seville production is the most acclaimed and influential Spillane film, although at the time, critics dismissed it.
The thing that strikes me most about Kiss Me Deadly is what a tough movie it is, being extremely brutal, extremely downbeat in many ways. It sort of dodges any opportunity for an easy way out, a happy ending. It's an extraordinary film.
It's a big cult thing in France. Why it became that, I don't know.
Director Robert Aldrich transposed Hammer from New York to Los Angeles. And Broadway actor Ralph Meeker portrayed a slick, sleazy, self-interested bedroom dick.
Who are you?
My name is Mike Hammer. Matters.
What do you want?
The film was a left-wing attempt by Aldrich to undermine and criticize the conservative Spillane.
Stop the knife!
Despite their intentions and Spillane's rejection, Kiss Me Deadly, minus Mickey's comma, vividly captures the gritty, surrealistic world of the early Mike Hammer novels.
Film noir had come along in the 40s and flourished in the post-war years, in the late 40s. So we'd seen tough, hard-boiled, dark-hued stories before, and we'd had anti-heroes before. But Kiss Me Deadly is, I still think, not only one of the best, but one of the harshest.
I loved the way Ralph Meeker portrayed Mike Hammer. Totally different than the way I play him or the way Darren McGavin played him, but he was a tough, nasty, no-nonsense guy.
The recent discovery of the long-missing 60-second ending stirred interest in this great crime film.
There had been rumors about this alternate ending for years, and some people had seen some of those prints that had the cataclysmic ending. When someone finally found Aldrich's personal print and pieced the whole thing together for a home video release.
But the next and final Seville production was a low-budget disaster.
Terrible. I felt sorry for the actors. And I always thought that Seville would have the sense to do what was right. He never did.
My Gun Is Quick died at the box office in 1957. But the following year, a Mike Hammer TV series proved successful.
Then Darren McGavin got it. We did it for 2 years. Oh, yeah, he was great.
Mickey was happier, but still frustrated. McGavin wasn't physically imposing enough. And missing in action was Mike Hammer's trademark .45.
The .45 has something nasty about it. I said, what do you use a .45? They said my hand was too small. You go in the Army, you don't say, well, my hand's too small for a .45.
The series ran for 2 years in a television landscape swarming with Mike Hammer's offspring. But celebrity had finally taken a toll on the blue-collar writer. He and Marianne were divorced in 1962. Mickey's book jacket photos had blurred the line between Mike Hammer and his creator, reinforced by his screen debut in Ring of Fear. Finally, producer Bob Fellows talked Mickey into showing Hollywood how Mike Hammer should be played.
It was fun to do. I knew the words because I had written the script.
He really enjoyed playing Mike Hammer, you know. He really did, and I think perhaps because it's his own hero, it was easier for him. He was a natural.
We shot all of the establishing shots in New York, shots where we're going in now, like the Blue Ribbon restaurant, but the actual stuff, the big stuff, the dialogue and all, we shot over in England.
Actually, the very first time he sees me, he comes into the courtyard of a house, and I'm in the swimming pool with the bikini. I believe some American critic said in an onion skin bikini or something.
You're Laura now. Everybody said, I thought you were much taller. Well, I was in charge of casting, so I wouldn't hire anybody who was bigger than that.
If I don't talk, will you belt me one?
Hell, I never had dames. I always kick them.
Walk down the stairs. Typical love scene of those days, really. And he's on the sofa, I believe.
I'm an amateur. I'm not a professional actor. I'm on the couch. Wait, there's no one. There's no world out there. Just Shirley and me, and I forget them. You know. What's happening on that couch? All the guys are. There's not a sound. The cameras come closer and closer. Now, when you say cut on the set, there's instant pandemonium. And everybody gets rush, you know, running around. So the cut comes on, goes out of focus, and Joyce says, cut! And nobody moved. He says, cut! And nobody moved. And this little voice way in the background says, throw cold water on them.
It was really fascinating to be working with a writer, as he likes me to call him, not an author, playing his own leading man.
Ironically, Spillane's competition came from an author his own publisher had promoted as the British Mickey Spillane.
Shocking.
And Mickey's co-star's next film would go on to gain her greatest fame.
Bond. James Bond.
As the Golden Bond Girl.
Well, I think the difference between Mike Hammer and James Bond is sophistication with James Bond. And Mike Hammer character is very, very down-to-earth and low-key and earthy. I met Ian Fleming, and he really was the epitome of the elegant Englishman. They're so entirely different, but interesting.
Though the picture was only modestly successful, Mickey got raves for his acting. The Girl Hunters was based on Spillane's first Mike Hammer novel in 10 years. And the 1960s and early 70s were a prolific period for the writer.
I mean, I grew up seeing Spillane and Miller beer commercials. And that meant a lot to me, you know, that a writer was in those commercials. When was the last time you saw a writer in any other commercial? I mean, he's pop culture.
I started drinking light beer from Miller a couple of years ago. I started drinking it because I heard it was less filling. But you know something? I kept on drinking because it tastes so great. Now, I don't care what you guys like about it, as long as you like it.
We took light beer from Miller and took it from a beer that wasn't in existence and made it the second highest selling beer in the world.
Chapter 9. I kicked on the door and shouted freeze to the lone figure in the room. Even in the darkness, I could see she was the most beautiful woman I ever met. Then I saw the light beer from Miller. It's got a third less calories than a regular beer, and it's less filling, she whispered. But the best thing is, it tastes so great. Suddenly, all the pieces fell into place, and I knew I'd come to the end of a long, long road. She poured, we drank. To be continued.
And today, I don't go any place in an airport. People see, they'll yell at me, hey, Mick.
Where's the doll? Where's the doll? And, or where's Mickey?
Spillane and his doll found themselves in a hugely popular advertising campaign, otherwise populated by former star athletes.
I was the only one who was satirizing my character. I played Mike Hammer in this with the beautiful blonde.
And I became an all-star like the rest of the guys. They were all men and the one female. It went on for 18 years. We did the commercials. 18 years of friendship and traveling. It was really great.
The enormously popular Miller Lite campaign helped keep Mickey Spillane a household word during a period when he was writing only occasionally. But it was another long-lasting business relationship that kept Mickey's private eye in the public eye.
I was flying to New York for something, and I looked up. I was in first class, and there was Mickey Spillane. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a dream.
And I was sitting there, I was about to go to sleep, and Jay walked in, and he said, she walked toward me, her hips waving a happy hello.
And he put the paper down and smiled, and we talked for a minute or two. He told me later, he said, oh my gosh.
I got another fan going to sit down here and talk to me all night when all I want to do is sleep.
So he started reading the paper again, and I said, women stuck to Mike Hammer like lint on a blue serge suit. And then he laughed, and we started talking.
Before we got into New York, I had sold him the rights for $1 to Mike Hammer. And he has been, we've been together for 20 years.
I got to make one movie, which was with Kevin Dobson. We did a Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer, Murder Me, Murder You, with Stacy Keach. But it was never a pilot. But at this time, Ronald Reagan was about to become President of the United States. And I said, look, if Ronald Reagan can get in, Mike Hammer can get on.
We tried really, really hard to preserve a lot of the feel of the original Mike Hammer, and I think Stacy did a wonderful job. He had that brashness, toughness.
The thing that appeals to me about Mike Hammer specifically is the fact that he is the champion of the little guy. He is the champion of the victim who cannot tolerate bureaucracy, who cannot tolerate the machinations of politics. And I guess, in many ways, Mike Hammer is politically incorrect. And God help him, I hope he always stays that way.
Mickey Spillane was once shunned by many of his fellow mystery writers and viciously attacked by critics and the media. But in 1995, he was finally recognized by the Mystery Writers of America.
Critics don't decide anything. Publishers don't decide anything. No, the public is the one who decides everything. Writers don't have talent. Writers have mechanical aptitude. If I ever lost those two fingers, I'd be out of business. I don't rewrite anything. If it's not good enough the first time, it's not going to get any better by rewriting.
Nobody ever hit a noun against a verb like Mickey Spillane.
I think as long as people read private eye fiction, they'll certainly read Mickey Spillane. You have to.
The more violent the society becomes, or the more fear that people have, the more wistfully they look for a kind of a hero.
Yeah, I might take the book and throw it against the wall at the end, but by God, I'm going to read it. I'm going to finish it. And that's essentially what he has, a tremendous narrative drive and great emotional intensity.
Whatever anybody thought about him or his writing or anything else about him, he and his books changed the field in a very significant way.
You know, he was a star. And so I think he made room for people to be a star.
He's a very earthy, masculine, humorous man.
There's no gentler, sweeter man in the world. I mean, he's a tough guy, but he's also, he's a pussycat.
He's a real human being who doesn't much give a darn about anything else except being a real human being and living the life he wants to live the way he wants to live it.
I guess Mike Hammer's like that in a way, too. I mean, he's out there to do justice and to make sure that people do right.
And Mickey Spillane is, to me, one of the last great Americans.
I am not an author. I am a writer. A writer is on a day-to-day job all the time. He's writing this as a job for him. He's making money to keep the smoke coming out the chimney. I don't want to go out and dig ditches every day of the week. When it comes time to write, I get tired of doing one thing, and now I'm at the point where I can start enjoying typing the keys again.